Well, thank you for joining us for another podcast of Kristina's Not So Broken Brain. I am so incredibly excited about our host today, or co-host today, which is Grant Harris. Grant has a very amazing background, expertise in neurodiversity in the workplace. And Grant, I would like for you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, Kristina, awesome. Thank you for allowing me to be here to talk about my not so broken brain.
Yeah.
Uh, it's an honor to be here with you and your audience. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Grant Harris. I identify as a cisgender Black man. I am also a person with a disability. I happen to be autistic. I describe myself as an autistic person. I am also a DEI practitioner. I'm a certified diversity executive. I am also a published author, a corporate board member,
Hmm.
a podcast host. I'm a dad, husband, brother, et cetera, et cetera. I'm lots of things rolled up in one. I like to tell people that I'm an onion because I have multiple layers, but I'm an
Mhm.
onion without the smell. So that's how I like to describe myself. The work that I do, I've been able to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work on many levels, specifically with government, K-12, higher ed, and also in my freelance work. So I spend a lot of time working with nonprofits and organizations that are small to mid-sized, working with those leaders to help them move through what I like to call from compliance to community.
Mm.
Talk about that more, but
Yeah.
in short, risk compliance is a fixed mindset to very much check the box when it comes to a DI perspective, and community is a growth mindset. And how do we give everyone in the organization the opportunity and the access to reach excellence? Because I'm about helping leaders reach excellence. So that's me in a nutshell in terms of what I do and how I do it, and very much looking forward to this particular conversation. I also spend lots of my time talking about neurodiversity in general, but specifically, I promote neurodiversity in the workplace from the boardroom to the mailroom because it's important. And I have been in those positions myself. And now I'm in a position to help organizations maximize that talent and those people within the workplace, or whatever that workplace looks like, virtual, remote, hybrid, et cetera, does not matter to me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Grant. I love what did you say, from the boardroom to the mailroom?
Correct. That
That's,
is it. It's in every level of an
yeah,
organization. Neurodiverse people exist, and we can get deeper into stats and numbers and all that. But neurodiverse people have been around in the workforce for a very long time. And it's just now in the last 2 years becoming, I don't want to say a fad or a trend, but is a hot topic in
yeah,
terms of how do we utilize these people in our workplace. They exist. Oh, I didn't know, but now you know, and when you know better, you should be able to do better.
that's right.
That's not always the case, but that's why people like me and you exist, to help people do better. So
Absolutely. And so that's what you do now. I would love to hear a little bit about how you got to this place.
yeah, certainly that would be my origin story. I have a story about being the first and the only within my family. I have a history of being the first and the only in my family. I'm the first one, to my knowledge, that's been diagnosed with any type of neurodiversity at all. I am the first in my family to be a homeowner. I'm the first in my
Mhm.
family, well, not to get married, but to continue to be married. I'm the first in my family to have kids. I'm the first of my siblings to reach what used to be a financial milestone as a millennial, is hitting a six-figure salary. And that is not what it used to be. I've been reading a lot about that in
Right.
the recent press. But at one point in time, that was a milestone, and you hit
Mhm.
that milestone financially, and supposedly you've made it. That's not necessarily the case, but that's what people think. But I was first to do that. I have been the first to sit on corporate boards, for profit and nonprofit.
Mhm.
Um, but that's from my family perspective.
Yeah.
In my work life, I also have a history of being either the first or the youngest or the only or a combination of those three in the room. The first one to chair an inaugural diversity and equity inclusion committee at a higher education institution, either the youngest in the room or on my team, or the only person of color in the room or on the team or at the table.
Yeah.
So these things I have been accustomed to for the majority of not only my personal life growing up, also my social life, and also my work life. And again, I've become accustomed to it, but becoming accustomed to it does not mean that one, I don't notice it, and two,
Right.
that it doesn't affect me. It does, both consciously and subconsciously. It's just something that I've gotten used to as I've grown in my career. So that's what I mean by first and only, and those are some of the things that I mention in the prologue of my book. I give people a more in-depth view of what that is. I always want to lead with empathy, transparency. I lead with my privilege. We all have privilege. Privilege is not a four-letter word, although
Mhm.
some people get it that way. So I lead with those things so people have an understanding of my personal perspective and where I come from. You know, I look on my wall, I have lots of degrees and papers and certifications, and I was the first to get some of those in my family as well. And they all make me sound smarter than what I am. That's not what it's about for me. Part of who I am, being an autistic person, I'm a sponge. I love learning
Right.
about myself, about you, about other people. So I'm always seeking more knowledge,
Mm.
more education, whatever way I can get that. And it happens to manifest itself in degrees and certificates and certifications. But that's not what it's about for me. That's not the end
Mhm.
goal. The is learning more about myself and my place in the world as a disabled person, number one, as a neurodivergent person, number two, and as an autistic person, number three. All of those are
Yeah.
different layers of
Yeah.
person. They're different layers of how I interact with the world and how the world sees me, outside of the fact that they see me as a black man in America first and foremost, before
Right.
they see or understand any of those other things. So that's me and my first and only. Not to say other people in my family have not seen success, whatever that is, they have. But I've just been able to do certain things before or the only time in that aspect.
That's awesome. And that's a great origin story and a very interesting thing to share is because a lot of the things that we bring to the table at work have to do with how we were raised and the environment that we were exposed to. How do you think that that escorted you into this line of work, or did it? Or did something else happen where you ended up working in this area?
Oh, like most people, I did not go to school to learn DEI.
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
so I'm a psychologist by trade. I'm a psych
Okay.
undergrad. My my MBA is in organizational psychology and development.
Love
I have
it.
a postmaster in educational leadership and administration, um, et cetera, et cetera. So I am a thinker. I think about my thinking.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
also autistic, which helps with that.
Yeah.
But I'm a reader, writer, thinker. And my in undergrad, my minor was philosophy. So I'm
Okay.
always theorizing. I was also philosophizing, thinking about my thinking, and that has helped me in my consulting life because I'm always suggesting and have this Socratic kind of conversation with folks like yourself and especially clients that I work with. I try to help people lead themselves to their own answers versus
Yeah.
me just giving them the answer and feeding it to them. So that has been helpful in the line of work that I do, but I did not study diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was put in positions to informally do this work.
Mhm.
And then it rolled into doing it formally because I said, oh, I've done all these things by volunteer, by raising my hand,
Yeah.
or being in a position to say, oh, well, we might think about it this way, or we might try it this way, or that sentence doesn't sound so correct or not correct, but it could be much better. So these types of things led me to those informal roles. which other people saw things in me and they were like, oh, well, why don't we do this or why don't we give him this opportunity? Until the last handful of years where obviously I have put pedal to the metal in terms of doing this work full on. And obviously, my diagnosis certainly helped with that, becoming a person with a disability, part of a protected class,
Mm,
learning more neurodiversity. My wife, I live with it day in and day out. My wife is ADHD
mhm.
and has been for a long time. And in terms of she's been medicated for a very long time.
Gotcha.
My oldest daughter successfully battles anxiety and depression, and she's been medicated on and off. My other two kids, they're a bit young to get them tested for anything, but I would not be surprised if they popped up on a spectrum or popped up on a diagnosis.
Mm,
So these things I have lived with personally. And before my wife and I were married, we dated for many, many years. So it wasn't new to me even before stepping into marriage. It just added a different layer with me being
yeah.
autistic and those two types of neurotypes,
Yeah.
how they mesh and how they clash, and
Yeah.
all of her things and all of my things. Communication is always key, and we can talk more about that. But all of that is how I got rolled up into doing this work and talking about it in the workplace. My mother was 30 some odd years in HR. So I always grew up with her perspective. HR is great in lots of ways and not so great in other ways.
Mhm.
But I grew up with that in that corporate environment, which I also believe allows me to have those types of conversations at those
Mhm.
high levels and speak that language in a way that resonates with those types of leaders.
And that's a really good point because one of the things that interests me in what you're saying is that you did industrial and organizational psychology, which is a hyper focus of mine. I don't know why I didn't go into it, but it's incredibly interesting the way organizations work and are structured and everything, right? And then I hear that you worked with government agencies and you worked with larger higher ed institutions. What I hear when you say that is red tape
Mm.
and processes that are not equitable, accessible, and they're also assumed because people are like, well, I got to this point. This is how we've done it. So I want to keep doing it this way because of whatever reason. And when I hear you talking about going, I think you said it from compliance to community. You
Mhm.
said that. And that has me intrigued on what is your approach like when you go into an organization and they've got a ton of red tape and government agencies and higher ed is like that. There's institutional baggage and then there's also red tape.
Mhm.
So when you're wanting to shift things in the DEI realm, how do you even approach that when you have all of these, you know, real roadblocks and then,
Mhm.
imposed roadblocks by culture or something along those lines?
Mhm. Great question. Appreciate that question. So a lot of what you're talking about, red tape, communication, whether or not this work is supported or whether it's viewed as performative, etc. One, it starts with a conversation with the right person or people. Two, organizations and institutions did not get the way that they are overnight. And nothing
Yeah.
that is a potential solution is going to happen overnight as well.
Hmm.
So these things take time. When I have conversations with leaders about whether or not this work is needed or whether they come out and say that explicitly or not, because they say, oh, well, DEI is performative, I would agree with them. And I say, yes, you are correct
Yeah.
because a lot of it can be people. There are organizations that claim to do DEI work. And DEI, let me take a step back. Obviously, with the polarization of that term and people saying, I'm not going to say it anymore, I'm going to use a different word or phrase. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are three separate things, but they work together.
Yeah.
The acronym of DEI has been balled up and rolled up into this four-letter word, for lack of a better term, that people are afraid of, and that is where the fight is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about that because it's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
But this type of work,
Mhm.
this what I call organizational excellence, is that's what I call it because it's about being excellent. It's not necessarily about an ideology. It's not about a theory. These are hard, concrete principles, uh, tactics, strategies that have been proven over time in
Mhm.
order to take an organization from where it is now to where it can and should be. And that's what I like to call organizational excellence. So when I'm having those conversations, I'm not necessarily talking about, oh, we need to do DEI. We need to find out how your organization can be better and how can it achieve a level of excellence. Now, excellence needs to be defined. And part of that excellence, part of that conversation is where I come in. It looks different for every organization, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are just doing DEI because it's not a thing that you do. DEI is not a thing. It is a set of principles, actions, behaviors, and that's where the community comes in
Yeah.
because we're moving from an area of fixed mindset. This is the way I think. I think the way I think. These people think the way that they think. And we've been thinking this way for a very long time. Great, you think that way. The only way to change that is to not think differently, but to do differently, to
Mm.
be different, act differently. You have to change behavior over time. So one of the ways that I help organizations do that is through a framework that I have created. It's called RACE as an acronym, RACE, and is a 4-step process. And some of these steps we stay in a lot longer than other steps. Some of
Right.
them doesn't take time, energy, or effort. All of the process takes time, energy, and effort, but it depends on what the organization is. But the first is to recognize. So recognize, acknowledge, cultivate, and engage. I talk about this obviously in my book. I also talk about this visually in a graphic on LinkedIn and on my platform so people can see it and digest it. But it's a cycle. And through this cycle, organizations achieve excellence over time.
That's
So I don't necessarily kick in the door talking about I'm the DEI whisperer at all,
right.
because that's not the case. It's how
Mhm.
can your organization achieve a level of excellence? Let's define what excellence is for you. And in my excellence across the board in the general term is that every employee, every staffer, whatever you call them, whoever works for you and with you has the access and the opportunity to achieve their full capacity. And
Mhm.
when people that work with and for you are achieving their full capacity, number one, and they feel like that they belong in that space, number two, then that is a general level of excellence, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Then we get into specifics, what that looks like, different industry and all that kind of thing. But from a general perspective, people have the opportunity, the tools, and the resources they need to achieve their full capacity, whatever it is for them. And they feel like that they belong in that environment, whether it's virtual, hybrid,
Yeah.
100% day to day, they feel like they belong. Once those two things are created and they're sustainable and you maintain them over time, that's attaining a level of excellence that I propose to my leaders that I work with.
And that's so important because when it comes to belonging, sometimes at the end of the day, your performance is graded, right? Like you get compensation for how you perform at the end of the day. But if you don't have the tools and you're kind of told too bad, so sad, you're not going to feel like you belong. Like it can be as what I'm hearing from you is that it could be as simple as having the right piece of technology or having the right amount of hours for your team, sizing up and sizing down. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm bored in a role, it is almost physically painful. And some people I've worked with before have said, like, oh, if you don't have that much work, isn't that great? And I'm like, it actually, being bored sometimes can be physically painful, especially
Yeah.
in a job where I'm supposed to be excelling.
Mm-hmm. So that comes to where equity is. Not every team is going to need the same tools. Not every team is going to need time. Some teams need more, some teams need less. But at the level that I work with leaders,
Mm.
those conversations have to go up and down the ladder as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but that gets to equity and how people are given what they need to be the employee that they need to be, that they want to be.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I love that because I had a conversation recently with a client and they're in a role that they enjoy. And they've been asked to go through leadership training and they're like, I am not at a season in my life where I want more responsibility. So it goes both ways, right? Like their company is pressuring them to, stand up and lead. And they're like, I've got kids, I've got elderly parents that I'm caring for. I'm paid well and I'm cared for and I've got a great team. I don't want to move up right now. That's
Yeah,
way too much
want to be
responsibility.
I just want to be an individual contributor.
Yeah, exactly. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of organizations, I feel like, got to a place, especially pre-pandemic, where the thought was everybody should be going above and beyond because they want to get to that next step. And I
Mm,
feel like maybe it was the pandemic, maybe it was realization about work-life integration, not sure what the patterns are there. But I feel like certain people are now being able to say openly, I want to be an individual contributor.
mm,
And
mm.
I'm okay with
And
that.
what is above and beyond? How do you define? What
Oof,
does that look? And if
oof.
someone chooses to go above and beyond for whatever that is defined as in their role, well, it should be okay for them to want to go above and beyond for the reasons that they want to. They
Mm,
just want to be a performer, a high performer, because it makes
yeah,
them feel good, because
yeah.
it fulfills them, because
Mm,
they set an example for their family. It shouldn't be that, oh, well, you go above and beyond just so you can get to the next ladder, the next rung on this ladder. That
yeah,
one, where is this ladder going?
yeah,
Two, how many rungs are on the ladder? Three, what if I don't have what I need in order to even climb that ladder? What if I slip on the way up? Does that mean I never get an opportunity to climb again? So
ooh,
all of these things are what organizations have set up and what leaders are perpetuating in
mhm,
their leadership cycles instead of, okay, Christina, this is what above and beyond looks like in this particular role. If you
right,
choose to go above and beyond, that's great. And we're going to keep giving you whatever you need to go above and beyond for the reasons that you want to, because it makes you feel good,
right,
because you can sleep well at night, or you want to go above and beyond because you want to get to that next rung. And if you want to get to that next rung, we're going to help you get there. We'll give you
right.
mentorship. There will be some sponsorship, which are two separate things that we could
Mm,
spend a whole hour talking about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, but both of those things, in my opinion, need to be in an organization in order for it to be excellent. You can't necessarily have, you can have one without the other, but in my opinion, that's not excellence. That's
right.
like great. You got a piece of the puzzle, but you got to have both mentorship and sponsorship. It's about where that employee, and especially that neurodiverse employee,
Hmm.
what is the bar?
Yeah,
Why is that bar there? Okay, we understand that. If you want to go above that bar and just because you want to,
yep.
great. If you want to go above that bar because you want more in this particular trajectory that we have set up, okay, great. And we'll give you the supports that you need in order to do that.
Mm,
No one, no, neither of those employees should be looked at differently or treated differently. They should both be treated equitably based on what they are looking for their life and their career, etc.
So I want to take a step back here for a second because you said a lot of things that make my brain go, yes, and so many questions. So sometimes when we talk about challenges that you just spoke about, when it comes to what Christina needs in the workplace, what Grant needs in the workplace, it's not always about what's fair, it's about what's equitable. Can you speak a little bit about what that means on the ground level to a manager when they're the ones that are told that they have to implement a new process? How do you even begin to think about what's equitable and what's fair?
So when you're talking about middle level managers, I've had discussions and fireside chats about this. Middle level managers, they get bogged down in definitions.
Yeah,
Definitions are not bad. Words matter, phrases matter. I'm not saying that they don't.
yeah,
But beyond words, it's the actions and the behaviors that matter most. So if you are a middle manager and you're confused on the difference and the definitions between equity and fairness, which we won't get into here. But if you're confused on those, so first thing that I would suggest is that you, one, self-reflect on the behaviors that you have been showing with your team. And the best way to do that is to interact with your team, to ask them questions. I always tell my kids, you have two ears and one mouth. You should listen more than you speak. So, in order to learn more about your particular behavior as a hiring manager and how it can get better, one of the best ways to do that is to ask your team about their input and their thought. Now, in order to do that,
Yeah,
there has to be a level of what's called psychological safety. Again, whole another podcast that we could talk about,
absolutely.
but that may not exist and that may take time. It may not exist outside of your middle management control because it may be a larger issue. But what's within your middle management control is setting up that psychological safety within your team, within the group of the people that you manage, and starting from scratch and being open and honest and transparent and say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. I'm trying to be better for you. I want this team to be more efficient, effective, and equitable. And middle managers may not use those terms, but I want this team to be better. That's what I talk about. Teams should be efficient, effective, and equitable. But a middle manager say, well, I just want to be better. And I want to give you what you need to be better.
Yeah,
That's what it comes down to is how do we get better in having a conversation and listening to the people that are working with and for you to say, this is what I need in order to be better based on the parameters that are set up within the organization. So it just starts there. So if you're a middle manager, don't get bogged down in the definition between equity and fairness. You can show both of these things by being open and transparent and vulnerable to the people that you lead by asking them what they need, how they want to work, how they need to communicate, what their preferences are, having that type of communication. And once you have that conversation, you have now opened yourself up to not just be a middle manager. You open yourself up to be a leader within the organization. And when you start asking questions of what people need in an open and honest way to say, how
mhm.
can we do to be better? That's when you become a leader. And that's when psychological safety spreads from that team to another team to another team throughout the organization. So that's what I suggest. Don't get bogged down in definitions. Think about how you can act and behave differently and
Mhm.
start by just listening, which doesn't require you as a middle manager to actually be perfect or to
Right.
actually do anything except ask a question and listen, ask a question and listen. And then you go back and you gather all that information and you synthesize it and you look for themes. Okay, there's a theme here. People need more time. People need more technology. People need less of me as the middle manager over their shoulder.
Right.
You might not get all that information upfront because, again, the level of psychological safety within the organization, but it starts with you as a middle manager because leadership is not just from the top. Leadership is from the boardroom to the mailroom and everywhere in between. So it starts with you as a middle manager. That's what I suggest to middle management. That's
Mm.
what I would tell to a person that was, asking that question.
That's awesome. Because so many times we might, and it's just like you said, an organization did not get that way overnight, where they have some of these challenges and they see them and they're trying really hard to own them, and they're not going to turn the leaf overnight either and turn and move things around and make it better. And what I've seen also is that there's a lot of leadership around, like, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and then they push it on the middle managers to implement and just, get on board. And so this is important that you come at it with, like, this is all about, yeah, like you said, words matter, the things we say matter, and it really is all about action and giving yourself permission to reflect on how you interact and how you approach moving from manager to leader, which to me is very different.
Yeah, I saw a graphic, a picture on LinkedIn the other day from one of my colleagues, and it was interesting. It was basically it put me in the mind of like ancient Greek and Roman times,
Mm. Yeah.
and they were building something. So there were three people in the front, and they were pulling a big stone behind them, and the stone said mission. And then on top of the stone was a person, and he was the taskmaster, and his title was boss. And then beneath that, it was the same three people with the same mission behind them. But instead of
Mm.
the boss sitting at the top of the mission saying, go that way, the boss was in front of those three people. Now there's four people and saying, come on, follow me. And that is a form, that is a version of leadership. And
Mm.
that was the new meme. Lead was like, oh, boss to leader. And you don't have to, the image was driving home a point. There are different ways to lead.
Right.
But that particular one hit with me because, you have a boss that just says, go do, versus a leader that says, let us do this together and build a community within this small team that could be three people, or
Mm.
within this large organization that could be 30,000 people.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is interesting. When I was prepping for speaking with you, I was looking at your book, Unlocking Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Success. And it seems like a lot of the themes in that book is exactly what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, I hope so. That would backing up what I was writing about. There's lots of themes throughout the book, and about the book, the way that came about, I can tell you, Christina, I did not have an epiphany. I
Hmm.
wasn't hiking in the Alps. I wasn't on a pilgrimage. I
Yeah,
wasn't, none of that said, oh, well, I need to go write a series of books. That's not how most of life works. It
it's
didn't
not.
work for me in that way. I was looking for more work. I have always been accustomed to writing. I've always enjoyed writing. I never had an issue writing throughout high school, college, all those papers that my classmates and teammates would complain about, 12, 15-page paper. I never complained about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it wasn't the most fun thing. I'm a college kid. That's what we're supposed to do. But I never complained. It was like, oh, I hate this. I can't. I enjoy writing.
Okay.
So at the time, I wanted to expand my service offerings past just consulting and speaking, wanted to dive deeper into writing. I went looking for opportunities. There was an opportunity to ghostwrite, and I had never done that before. I had heard about
Okay.
it. And I said, okay, there's a client here that wants to ghostwrite a book. And I was like, huh. I saw what they were looking for, had a conversation. And through many and several conversations, this particular publisher was like, you know what? I think you need to write this book and it needs to be yours. And you should be the name author. And you should write this series of books. And I was like, well, that's not what I was going for here. I was just, another
Yeah.
opportunity to do some
Yeah.
business. But I thought about it. I spoke about it with my wife and I said, huh, I never thought about being an author, but I have an opportunity to do so. I have an opportunity to talk about the things that I've been living, have an opportunity to share a story and help other people and organizations get better.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, never have an opportunity. I always try to take an opportunity because, again, like people say, you don't regret what you did, you regret the opportunities that you did not take. So
It's true.
that is the not sexy, not epiphany version of how it led to my first book. It is a series of five. It's focused on workplace culture. They have themes. The first is all about foundational frameworks,
Mm.
how you think about the unconscious and implicit bias and all other types of
Mhm.
bias. I have a bias against only talking about unconscious bias because there are many other types. There's over a dozen types of biases that I could think of off the top of my head. Other books would talk about inclusive leadership. So they all have these themes. And
Mhm.
throughout them, I talk about my framework, my race framework. So that's where the book came from. I am transparent with that because I don't want people to think that somehow, I had been wanting to be an author for 10 years. And again, with the epiphany and like it took some moment to strike. It
Yeah.
was someone else convincing me that I should be the one doing that work. And in my opinion, Christina, sometimes that's the best thing in life because if you
Yes.
go through life, I want to do this, I want to do this, and this is my passion. Not my passion. You should follow your passion, but this thing, whatever that thing is, and you have it in your mind, and you pursue that thing with all your might, with all your energy, with all your money, and you might get that thing and you're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
This is not who I thought I was going to be when I got this thing. Or you could not be looking for that thing and you're living your life doing other stuff. And
Yeah.
somebody says, oh, what about if you did this thing? They were like, I never thought about doing that thing. Why would I do that thing? That's not my thing. But then you do that thing and it's like, oh,
Oh,
this is a cool thing. So
I
that's
love
what
it.
it was for me because I did not intend to be an author at all,
Mm.
but it's been a blessing. It's been a challenge writing with a family and 3 kids. My wife runs an in-home daycare. I have multiple kids throughout my house all the time. But being autistic helps with that in terms of
Right.
my drive, my concentration, the way that I work, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a blessing, but it's also been a challenge.
Yeah. That's amazing. And what I hear when you speak about all of that is that you continue to put yourself out there for opportunities and you
Yeah,
also take them into consideration, even when in the past you might have been like, no, that's like you said, you never thought about necessarily doing this. You were looking into ghostwriting gigs because writing was, you're like, this isn't too terribly hard for me. It's like it's work, but I mean, it's not
yeah,
crazy. But you
yeah,
were open to opportunities,
yes,
which is, I think, the key thing there. One of the things that has opened me up, like as a business owner too, especially one with ADHD, is having conversations with people like you and having relationships with, just building out your network, right? And made my mind explode. Some of the things that people first of all had the audacity to say to me, that's a different podcast, but the
mm,
things that people say to me and that inspire me into action. I'm like, because
yeah,
I never thought about doing a certain project that I'm working on right now that I'm hoping to like announce in a couple of weeks. It would have never crossed, you shouldn't say never, but it had not crossed my mind.
yeah,
And it's rolled seamlessly with this one future partner. And I'm like, how did I not see this? But they were the
yeah,
ones that were like, hey, I see us collaborating and partnering this way. And I'm like, huh. And it took me about 3 weeks to kind of wrestle it in my brain a little bit. And then one day it clicked and I could see what they were saying. But I had to
yeah.
have somebody else come in and say, hey, I see your expertise applying over here, and we think you can do it better than we can. And I was like, thank you. And excuse me? Like,
Well, one, that's very exciting. I'm excited for you. Congratulations. I'm looking forward to that good news.
yeah.
And I would agree, being open opportunities. That's how you and I eventually met. I have what I like to call informational interviews all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, I I like to spend time with people, getting to know about them. I am not a people person. My condition and the way that I think and the way that I live life, everybody knows that one of my common saying is that I don't like people that I don't know, which is true,
Yeah.
but I put myself in those positions because I know it makes me better as a person. It gets me out of my comfort zone,
Mhm.
gets me on camera, which I prefer to be off based on a lot of things to do with my autism, etc.
Yeah.
But and it makes me a better business person as well. But those informational interviews, those 15-minute, half-hour phone calls have been some of the most inspirational, some of the
Mhm.
most productive and effective and efficient from a perspective that I may not have known going into it, which is again how our relationship has been flourishing.
Yeah.
So I commend you for the work that you're about to do because it sounds awesome. I'm very much looking
I'm
forward to it.
excited about it. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. And it's important to note, I love that you're calling them informational interviews. So you and I got connected by Dawn Christman,
Yes.
and I was introduced to her because of Paul DeBettis, who I met over 10 years ago and had not had a conversation with when I was living in another state, like another
Mm,
lifetime ago. And the reason Paul and I connected was because I had posted on Twitter at my first full-time job, I had an offer to change jobs, and it was the same pay, not the same benefits, but it was going into the field I wanted to go into.
Yeah.
But I was like, the current job I have has unlimited PTO and, all those things that you want as like a 24-year-old, right? Like, and I posted on Twitter. He was following me, I was following him. And basically what ended up happening is he was like, let me call you. And he's a recruiter. And he's like, let's talk through these benefits. And he took 20 minutes out of his day to talk to somebody who wasn't paying him, who was new in the career world, to sit there and say, what are your priorities and your needs in your life right now? He's like, do you got kids? And I was like, no. He's like, do you have the money to travel and take that time off? Also, no. He's like, do you have elderly parents that you're taking care of, external needs that you need to be able to take afternoons off every couple of weeks? No. He's like, why do you need unlimited PTO?
Kristina, one, we sometimes these conversations go places, but I have been in jobs with unlimited PTO, and it's more prevalent these days over the last few years.
Right.
But one, I want to let all of your listeners know, don't take the unlimited
Yeah.
PTO.
They don't have to pay it
Don't
out.
do it. Don't do it. It sounds rosy. It sounds awesome. Oh, you can take as much
Yes.
time as you want. One, we're
Yeah.
humans in America. You're not going to take that time. Two, like you said, it does not get paid out, which is basically a way that organizations and corporations bait employees in to say, oh, well, we'll give you this and it's nice and shiny, but underneath the surface, it really benefits. It gets murky. And I saw this in my feed. I'm always, again, looking at information. Just yesterday, there was a video or TikTok out about not taking the unlimited PTO. And I had already experienced the bad side of unlimited PTO, and it just reconfirmed that. So yeah, audience listeners, don't do
Mhm.
it. Ask for specific PTO, because
Yes.
that is you as an employee standing up for yourself, standing up for your family, initiating and taking control of your career, and also taking control of your finances, because that you can get back in compensation. And I know that this particular podcast is not about that, but I run in organizations, and HR and benefits are part of organizations. And that in and of itself, that type of policy, the work that I do, looking at that type of policy and that
Mhm.
type of behavior and that type of mindset from an organization that says, oh, we're going to give them this, when this is not the real thing behind it. It's
Right.
not honest, it's not true, and it's a way for the organization to save itself versus putting the employee first, which is not organizational excellence by any stretch of the imagination, and which is a form of compliance, because you're complying to, we want to look out for us first, and it is not building community, which is
Mhm.
community. The entire organization looks out for its people like a village would do.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing up unlimited
Yeah.
PTO. And I hope that for our listeners, I was able to bring that back to the work that I do and how that applies to organizational excellence. But excellent point. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, no, I mean, creating those networks and having access to be able to make connections opens up conversations like that, where it's like,
Yeah.
hold on, let's talk about unlimited PTO and what a misleading bait and switch it is. I did see online some organizations stopping unlimited PTO for that reason and doing like mandatory 3 weeks with
Mm.
other weeks to negotiate if, I've got a wedding or I've got some
Yeah.
other situation. Um,
Floating days and all that. But the fact that they are looking out for their employees, because they know that Americans do not take the time.
you don't,
The average worker does not take that 2 weeks of vacation,
which is
and
baffling.
it leads to burnout, leads to a lot of things, leads to health crises,
Yeah.
especially in Black and brown populations. Everybody, but especially in Black and brown populations, that they don't take that time. It's a domino effect when organizations put in and use policies and procedures and practices that do
Mhm.
not benefit employees. And it's great to hear. And not no policy is ever going to be perfect, and all of that, but it's great
Yeah.
to hear that they're putting people, or they're putting their employees in a position that they have to look out for themselves. And when they do that, that is self-serving for the organization, because the organization knows if people take time and they take time off, they're healthier, they work better, and they're
They
happier, and everybody
exactly.
benefits. The
Yes.
entire community benefits, not just the people at the top of the compliance chain.
That's right. And that's wild too, because they've done studies on that, right? Where it's like the people who take time off, who have firm boundaries, are the most productive.
Correct.
Like, and a lot of people who have outside interests and pursue them are the most engaged at work because they have a life outside of it and their brains can switch around.
The most engaged, also the most creative, or the
Yes,
more creative, because
yes,
they are in experiences and things that they see here outside of work, and they're bringing it to their desk and to their team. And we're like, hey, this connected over here, and
right.
that makes them creative, innovative, and like you said, engaged employee. So yeah.
Absolutely. Something you said about when it comes to compliance and everything like that about the unlimited PTO reminded me about when I educate managers on opportunities on how to provide accommodations for staff and come up with ideas. They're like, well, I don't have the budget. HR doesn't have the budget. I was like, I get it. Not everything has to be a paid for accommodation. And they're like, well, they go into the whole not fair. It's not fair that this employee gets this and another employee doesn't. And so I asked them if they have any parents on staff. And they say,
Mhm.
yeah, we've got parents on staff. I was like, do you ever let them leave early to go to child pickup or sick pickup? And then they work from home in the afternoon. They're like, yeah, of course. Like, we have to understand family first. I'm like, that's an accommodation.
Mhm.
That is an accommodation that you are not paying for, that they
Mhm.
might work one less hour. They're like, yeah, but they'll work more tomorrow. And I'm like, you are making accommodations already for staff
Yes.
informally. And
Yeah.
so because this person has ADHD or is ADHD or dyslexic, that's a bias that you have.
It is.
You feel
It
like the
is.
parents can have accommodations and this person is not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we're coming up on our time. I
Oh yeah.
have gone through accommodations in my experience in the last few years of being diagnosed. But you are correct. Most accommodations are cheap.
Yeah.
Accommodations can be had for as little as $50
Yeah.
up to $5,000,
Yeah.
but the majority of them fall in that range.
Yep.
And they are also people that are asking for reasonable accommodations. It's
Yes.
part of a protected class. It's not about being fair or unfair. It's about sometimes you are supposed to check a box. Legally, this is supposed to happen.
Yep.
Legally, these people are supposed to get this. So that's not about being fair or unfair. If
That's
it's a
right.
reasonable accommodation, anywhere between $50 and $5,000, and that's the large range. But
Yeah.
most of them fall, in my experience, most of them fall between $50 and $500,
Yeah.
which is usually less than 5% of any type of operating budget within the organization. However, when you look at it from that perspective, giving people the accommodations they need or giving me the accommodations I need to be more effective and efficient is a form of equity without
Yeah.
saying so. And those people are people with a disability are part of a protected class and they have a right to those particular accommodations. But like you said, you can get creative with accommodations and it doesn't even have to cost you anything. It could be free. It's a form of accommodation.
Yep.
So anybody in a workplace can be accommodated.
That's right.
All employees can be accommodated. Some employees who have a formal disability might need more or different types of accommodations, and
Exactly.
some of them may cost something and some of them may not. However, if you don't accommodate people that are, excuse me, non disabled, and if you don't accommodate people who are disabled, that will cost your organization. It will
Yeah.
cost your organization in fees and taxes and healthcare and turnover in recruiting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
100%.
So the minimal cost of an accommodation versus the maximal cost of the fallout from not providing those accommodations pales in comparison.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it
that's why we
does.
do what we do.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And so we are towards the end where I like to do rapid fire questions.
Yes,
Um,
hit
cool.
me.
All right. Do you have hyperfixation foods?
I do not, but my eating habits, I do eat on a schedule.
Okay.
I do eat. I do not understand people that forget to eat. It baffles me. My wife says it all the time. I
Right.
eat on a schedule. Growing up, I had a steady diet of PB&J. I still do. when I was in college and I was getting ready for the football season, I ate like packs of hot dogs just on a regular. So I'm not hyper fixated, but I do not care about food as much as my family does. My
Oh,
families are
okay.
foodie. What did you order? What are you gonna get? How does it taste? Was it good? I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's
use
a
food as
vehicle for
fuel.
fuel.
Correct.
Yeah.
I look at it as fuel, and they're looking at, well, you eat with your eyes first. And I say, no, I eat with my mouth first. So I want my food to taste good. Like I
Right.
want
Yeah.
good food, but I don't care about how it looks, or I don't care what you ordered 3 weeks ago. I don't get excited because I'm about to eat. Not
Right.
nothing against people who do. My sister is like that. Other people are like that.
Yeah.
But that's me
Not
with
you.
food. So I don't have a hyper fixation, but I'm indifferent when it comes to food.
That's fair. That's fair. I am one of those people that forgets to eat. So I have timers that remind me to eat
Well,
during
yeah,
the day. Yeah.
I have lots of time.
Yeah. Do you have any current hyper focus project or research that you're doing right now?
Currently, I can tell you my hyperfixation will probably be flags. I enjoy flags. Anyone that knows about me and the fact that I'm autistic knows that I've memorized every flag of every country in the world because I like
Ah,
it's a common misconception. I'm autistic. I'm into trains. And I'm like,
yeah.
I've been on a train. I couldn't care less about trains in that way. And I'm not good at math. So I don't know like all the numbers and all that kind of thing. My memory is good. I can remember a long chain of some numbers, but I'm not good at math. But I do enjoy flags. And I did memorize hundreds of flags at one point in my life because I saw it as a challenge. In less than 30 days, I remembered all the flags of every country in the world. So that would be a fixation. Also, I am very much into tailored menswear. My wife would
Oh,
say I'm obsessed because I look at clothes more often than I should. Not as much more recently in life, but for many years when I used to be in that field, she would say that I was obsessed. So that's my hyper fixation between flags and menswear.
that's cool. That's really cool. I love asking that question because it always gives you a different side of
Yeah.
person. So like my fixation food right now is what was it? Why is my mind blanking? Oh, it's actually PB&J, and I've been making
Oh
it and
yeah,
putting
yeah.
it in the air fryer for like 1 minute. So it's like the peanut butter is almost like sweet when it's
Yeah.
warm. So that's
But
been
I
my
can tell you, I don't like. I am hyperfixated about how my PB&J is made. I do not like the way my wife makes the PB&J, and she'll tell you. But like, she puts the bread in the palm of her hand and
oh,
like spreads it that way. And I'm like, don't touch the
don't do
bread.
that.
Just leave it. Yeah, don't touch it.
Fair,
I don't know.
fair.
So and then on top of that, she'll like smush it together when it's done. So there's like a handprint in the bread.
Oh,
And I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, don't do that. So it's more
fair.
of my thing is more of like how it's made versus the fact that I'm eating it. But like, yeah. So
That's fair. Yeah, I have a very particular way that I want it made. So I'm
yeah.
with you on that.
I'm jelly first. I know some people put jelly on both sides and
Mm-mm.
then they put peanut butter, but I'm jelly first, jelly on the left, peanut butter on the right, and it's got to be the right like consistency. So, but yeah, I'm a PB&J connoisseur from that perspective.
Yeah. Side note on that, like I tried to do like organic peanut butter where they like stir the oil in, but
Yeah, yeah, same. Yeah.
it is good, but when you get to a certain part of the jar, it's just like hard, even though like you keep
Do you
stirring.
turn it upside down? You turn it upside down. So you turn the jar upside down. You're going to get that. Eventually, you'll get that at the bottom. But you turn the jar upside down and you don't have to stir as much. So you turn it upside down, all that oil will like
Right.
mix and you get less of the hard stuff at the bottom. So turn your jar. I also use organic peanut butter that's not like Jif. Jif is like, but you mix it up. So yeah, turn the jar upside down, you'll get a better result.
You changed my game.
There you go.
Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I have a jar that I haven't opened yet. So I'm gonna do that when I finish my current one. Okay. Last question has to do more with, do you have any future projects you're excited about that you
Yeah,
can
and
share?
continuing to write my books.
Yeah.
uh, but April is the big month for me coming up. This is my last podcast for March, but April is autism awareness. I choose to use, you can say either awareness or appreciation. I choose the appreciation. So April is Autism Appreciation Day. I do have on April 2nd, I have a podcast about autism in the workplace because April 2nd is World Autism Day. And then I
Mm,
have a webinar at the end of the month. I will also be hosting a week long Ask the Expert section in a platform called the DEI Hub, where I will take any question on a daily basis based around neurodiversity in general, but specifically in the workplace. And a couple other things in April when it comes to appearances and podcasts and spreading the word of this conversation about neurodiversity from the boardroom to the mailroom. So April is an exciting month coming up.
that's a lot. That's amazing. Well, Grant, it's been wonderful to talk with you today. I sincerely appreciate your time, and I will include a lot of the things that you talked about as links in the show notes. So if anybody wants to check that out. And thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing how everything goes and staying in touch.
Awesome, Christina. It was great to be able to spend time with you and your audience and your listeners. Thank you for having me and for the opportunity. I look forward to doing it again.
Sounds good.